Hello, boxing world. This prediction is going out to Austin Webb. I thank you for your participation in the channel, and I thank you for your request. I'm just going to give it to you raw and uncut, unedited. So here we go. The fight that Austin mentioned was Larry Holmes versus Lennox Lewis. To tell you the truth, I can't remember if I did this fight or not. I don't think I did. But even if I did, as my knowledge grows and as I learn more things about the sport, sometimes my predictions can change. I will admit that. So Larry Holmes versus Lennox Lewis going out to Austin Webb. Let's get into it. Lennox Lewis and Larry Holmes are the two top jabbers in the sport. So this is a classic battle of the jabs. Two great jabs, two educated jabs, two range finders, but more importantly, two power jabs. These guys can hurt you with just the jab. Both of these guys have size, height, reach, and power, which makes this a tremendous fight. This would be one for the ages. And it's so good that it's hard to call. Those make for the best fights, the ones that are hard to call, which means that it's going to be competitive, which means that there would be drama, that there would be back and forth, and that there would be anticipation. So who would prevail? Who would win the battle of the big guys and the battle of the jabs? I guess I'll start off with Larry Holmes. Well, let me start off with their resumes. I feel that as far as their quality of opposition, their experience, both of them being seasoned fighters, I think their level of opposition and their resumes are about the same. That's just my opinion. Lennox Lewis is often criticized for not fighting the best competition. I don't know where that comes from, to tell you the truth, but let's debate with facts and not feelings. Back to Larry Holmes. So Larry Holmes fought in a wonderful era. He fought in an era where the best fought the best, where the best fought often, and to where you actually had to fight to be considered the best. Back then, you had to earn it. Not that you don't have to earn it now, but back then you had to earn it. So, power jab, a power straight right hand, and just power everything, basically. And so Larry Holmes at his best was a very dangerous fighter. Lennox Lewis is the same. Power jab. And let me back up. The thing about these guys is these are big guys who fights like little guys. Big guys who fights like little guys, who moves like little guys. And they can throw any punch, from the left hook to the uppercut to the straight rights, going back to the jab. And both of these guys had great footwork for their sizes. I mean, you don't see many big guys. Well, Ali had great footwork, but Lennox Lewis and Larry Holmes are big guys. You know, super heavyweights, if you will, with awesome footwork. So I look at this as Larry Holmes and Lennox Lewis being the same fighter. But I think this fight would ultimately come down to confidence. It would come down to discipline and preparedness. Who would come into this fight more confident? Who would come into this fight more disciplined? And who would come into this fight more prepared? Who could take the better punch? And who has the better chin? And to tell you the truth, as great as Lennox Lewis was, a lot of fans questioned his chin. And rightfully so. Whenever he was caught with a good shot, he didn't react to it too well. And that's not to discredit Lewis, that's not to criticize him, but I'm just trying to weigh in, look at all the facts, and just consider everything before I make a call in this fight. I don't know everything. I'm just a fan who has gained a little knowledge of how things work inside of the ring. So I think it comes down to chins. I think Larry Holmes had a better chin, especially when he was in his prime. He had a better chin than Lewis. Both of these guys, as far as their preparedness, it was about the same. Sometimes it was hit and miss, which happens amongst the best fighters. These fighters are human at the end of the day. So it all comes back to these guys basically being the same fighter. So just to separate these guys, I think it would come down to who wants it more, to who is better prepared, who is trained more, who's had a better training camp. And let me tell you, Lennox Lewis, I'm a big fan. I'm trying not to be biased here, but I'm a huge fan of Lennox Lewis. And when Lennox Lewis was on top of his game, he was a dangerous guy. Same could be said for Larry Holmes. So I'm still struggling here. I'm trying to find something to differentiate these guys when they're both at their best and on top of their game. And what I love about this channel is you guys are going to give me your help. You guys are going to help me out with this one. I'm inching towards a decision, but I know you guys are going to help me out. As far as Lennox Lewis is concerned, very dangerous fighter, very underrated fighter, and very unappreciated. Lennox Lewis kind of has a demeanor to where he comes off as a distinguished gentleman, or maybe it's the way he talks. He carries himself in a dignified manner. But of course, that's different from when you're inside of the ring. So he was the total opposite when he was inside of the ring versus when he was on the outside of the ring. And on the inside of that ring, Lennox Lewis was a vicious killer. I would look at his opponents and I could tell that his opponents were very nervous. They were very afraid because Lennox Lewis had paralyzing power. Almost everything he did was power. And I mentioned the power jab earlier, but every now and then Lennox Lewis would paw with the jab. He would range find with the jab, but mostly he would throw a power jab. But back to Larry Holmes, he would throw a power jab as well. So once again, these guys are on an even playing field as far as skills, as far as ability, as far as talent, as far as experience, at their best, okay? Let's get back to the jabs. Who had the better jab? I have to decide who had the better jab. And you help me out with this one. And I must say that Lennox Lewis had the better jab because Lennox Lewis would switch velocity with the jab. He would throw the jab straight. He would throw an up jab. He'd throw a jab to the body. He would throw a quadruple jab. And I never forget when he opened up a cut above Rahman's eye in their second fight when he got revenge just by throwing a jab. That is a dangerous jab. So I will have to say Lennox Lewis has a better jab than Larry Holmes. I believe that Larry Holmes has a better chin than Lennox Lewis. They both have good footwork. I have to give Lennox Lewis the slight edge in footwork. Doggone it. Here's the decision. With both of these guys at their best, on top of their game, both of them getting that jab going, getting that jab established. And this is going to be a chess match. They're both going to range fine with the jab. They're going to feel their way with the jab. And it's just a matter of time before either one of them unleashes the right hand. Yeah, it's a matter of time. I have to go with my gut on this one. And my gut says Lennox Lewis stops Larry Holmes down the stretch. Those are my thoughts. Whether you agree or disagree, Lennox Lewis by stoppage via 10th, 11th, 12th, and final round. Those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think, and I will see you on the next video. I'm going to say something to my longtime fans, to my fellow diehard fans, to the people who remembered boxing in the golden era. If you grew up watching guys like Evander Holyfield, Mike Tyson at his best, Oscar De La Hoya, Sweet Pea Pernell Whitaker, Chavez Sr., Meldrick Taylor, Terry Norris, I could write a book and the list goes on. But what I have to say to you guys, well, first let me start off by saying that we know the boxing culture has changed. We know that fighters aren't fighting as much as they used to. We know we're not getting the bigger fights on a consistent basis like we used to. And it's just the way that it is. Music has changed, film has changed, and unfortunately, boxing has changed. But what shouldn't change and who shouldn't change are fans, are longtime fans who know the sport, not necessarily caring about the politics or what goes on behind closed doors, but who has seen the big fights, who has seen fighters like Holyfield in his heyday, Roy Jones Jr., Evander Holyfield. I mentioned these guys. If you've seen these guys in their heydays and you've watched fights like Meldrick Taylor versus Julio Cesar Chavez, if you've watched fights like Terry Norris versus Sugar Ray Leonard, and I won't even mention the Fantastic Four or the Fabulous Four. I never remember which one it is. Forgive me for that. If you've watched Holyfield versus Foreman, Holyfield versus, what's his name, Burt Cooper, Michael Moore, if you grew up watching any of these fights and you remember when boxing was good, why in the world are you going along with what's going on today? Why in the world are you talking like modern fans? You're talking like these young guys who don't remember pre-Floyd Mayweather boxing. You're talking to these young guys that don't remember fighters being great despite being undefeated. You guys are pushing the same narrative that they're pushing. You guys are acting like, let me slow down. 23. Excuse me. Anyway, why are you acting like new fans? Why are you acting like you don't remember how good boxing used to be and how boxing should be? You, along with the new fans, are making excuses for these big fights not taking place, for these guys not fighting as consistently as they used to. Or let me take that back. I'm not saying to fight 5-6 times a year. That's wear and tear on your body and on your mind. I do care. But at least twice a year. And if not twice a year, make one appearance a year. And if you're going to fight once a year, make it a good fight. I don't think that's unreasonable. But why are you guys talking like modern day fans? Why are you guys pushing this narrative that to be great, you have to be undefeated? And those of you who remember when boxing was good and boxing in its heyday, you all are writing fighters off for having one single loss on their record. There's no excuse for it. Now, when I hear the young guys or the young casuals talking this way, it gets on my nerves, but I can understand them. They don't get it. They don't bother to go back and watch old fights. But there's some of you who know better. And I need you to do better. Because the sport is counting on us. The sport is counting on the diehards. The sport is counting on those of us who know better to demand better. You see, right now, the young casuals are the ones making the noise. The young casuals are the ones that are calling the shots, and the young casuals are the ones that they are marketing to. So why in the world would you jump on their bandwagon? We're supposed to lead the charge. We know boxing. We've seen the greats. I saw the greats when they were the greats. So what is with you guys? Why are you talking like the young fighters or the casuals? What has happened to you? Have you been hypnotized or something? I don't get it. And I'm not sure I want to get it. But you guys need a wake-up call. If you remember, got a brain freeze here. If you remember Evander Holyfield fighting Burt Cooper, there's no reason for you to talk like this. If you saw Pernell Whitaker versus Oscar De La Hoya, and I'm just throwing fights out, if you saw Oscar De La Hoya versus Pernell Whitaker when it was happening, there's no excuse for it. So if you're a longtime fan, talk like a longtime fan. If you're a diehard fan, talk like a diehard fan. If you're a fan who normally knows what they're talking about and who understands the sport, talk like a fan who knows what they're talking about and understand the sport. You don't yield to the casuals. You don't yield to the new generation fans. You let them know how it was when it was at its best. I can go on and on, but I'll stop there. Give me your thoughts. I'm sure you will, and I welcome them.